14th of February, the Central Narcotics Bureau released their annual report, and it has revealed some worrying figures. So, for instance, over half of the new abusers arrested in 2023 were under 30. Use of cannabis and methamphetamine are also on the rise. Given Singapore's zero-tolerance stance against illicit drugs, how did we get here? Is our current messaging around drug use, especially towards the youth who are consuming social media, not working as effectively as we want? And more importantly, how do we fix that? So I just want to unpack a few of the key data that we have, and the fact that there are more young abusers, and meth use, in fact, has gone up. Also, the number of cannabis abusers reaching a 10-year high. We have one of the strictest drug laws in the world, and yet within these pockets, numbers are rising. Tell us, are you surprised by those numbers?
I'm not really that surprised, to be honest, and the reason is because I think there was a recent study actually done by the Institute of Mental Health. I think one of our assistant chairman of medical board, Professor Maiti Lee, was the lead author of this study. It showed essentially that the average age of onset of drug use among youth is about 15.9 years. So there's already some data from research showing that amongst our youth, the onset of drug use is quite early. And I think that is also due to what is happening around us geopolitically. A lot of countries have gradually either decriminalized or legalized drugs, and especially our neighboring countries.
And they're also trying to reverse now,
Yeah.
this particular trend, and places even popular destinations like Bali, for instance, even though it's not legal. But for instance, mushroom pizzas, cannabis, you can find this form in food, right? Just on the streets. So where do you think the messaging has gone wrong? Because I remember back in the day when I grew up, you get your parents, or you see the ads in buses or at the bus stop saying drugs are bad for you. We know it's a no-no. It's stuck until today. So where have we lapsed in that area?
Well, for us at NACADA, we would be having these conversations with parents, with community groups and so on, to kind of instill in them the need to start speaking to children pretty young. The problem really is that...
Sorry, Ravi, but when you say pretty young, what age are we talking about?
We're talking as young as 8, 9, 10, because it's all about discernment, knowing what's right and what's wrong. As you said, seeing the bus ads and seeing all the things about drugs and why they were bad and so on. It's changed now because parents aren't the source of information anymore. It's basically you're left with your social circles, your peers. You're looking at social media. You're looking at pop culture, which glorifies the use of, for example, cannabis. And meth is seen as something that is the next step after cannabis. So cannabis becomes your gateway into a lot of things. And when you're 13 years old, you don't know any better. There's this aspect of curiosity. If your friends are saying, hey, it's cool to do this, you're not going to stop. You're not going to say, hey, my dad said no or my mom said no. And the problem is most dads and moms don't talk about it. So if they don't start talking to their children young enough, they won't know any better, right? And so they give in to the pressure and they try it. And as they say, you don't need to try it many times to get addicted. One time, maybe just too many times, in that sense.
And you were talking about celebrities, and I remember watching or listening to Elon Musk, and he was doing some podcasts. He was smoking cannabis, concerts especially, they might not be filming it, but, everyone in the crowd is filming them, smoking
Correct.
marijuana and all of that. So, Han, let's just bring you in here. What is it that we need to fix? Ravi talked about speaking to your kids as young as 8, which is quite surprising to me that, why don't the messaging be that then? Speak to your children from age of 8.
Well, actually, from weaker communities' point of view, actually, we've always taken the approach that what is most effective therapeutically is when you have a person with lived experience helping another person who's struggling with the current experience. That has worked very well with the adult population. So it's a particular approach that we're also adopting right now, actually working with younger people. So what we do is that we go into schools, we have young people who have experienced addiction, who have overcome addiction, and we give talks and we engage young people at their level. And usually when we say to young people, we're talking about those age 14 and above. So we have been actively going to schools, polytechnics, pre-universities and colleges, and basically engaging them in open conversations. So we don't go in saying, drug is bad, don't do this, because we know that actually for youth, for young people especially, that's a turn-off. Because that's what gets them engaged on social media, is the ability to explore, to find information, to be heard. So the approach that we tend to take with younger people, especially with going to schools and education institutions, is to engage with them in open conversation and get them to talk about, if they think drugs is attractive, what is it about it that makes them think that it is attractive? So we get them to reflect, and we get them to think, and we get them to explore, and we get them to consider, are there particular alternative information that you have not considered? And that's where we actually get people with lived experience to share with them on what they've gone through, about their struggles with drug use and their struggles with the recovery process as well, and the impact on their future.
Yeah. So, Dr. Low, I mean, these strategies that we've mentioned, do they work? Or is it going to take a period of time before we see these numbers coming down? Because if we don't tackle, this issue now, then the problem is obviously going to compound.
Well, I think, there's a saying, it takes a village to raise a child. So I think it's often emphasized that, messaging is just one component of the whole armamentarium that we need to actually help youth get out of this drug abuse. We also need social support measures, community resources for activities for the youth to actually take part in. So messaging is one part. It has to be, as what Yuen has said, messaging has to be not critical, not overpowering, not forcing it down the youth's throat, but more of an explorative approach. But beyond messaging, I think it takes the whole of a government. This interministerial committee is then timely, because we need multiple ministries put together to be able to address something as complicated, something as as serious as drug use in our youth. So I think possibly more than just messaging. It's really how we help our youth find meaning in their lives. And very often using drugs is a symptom. It's having an addiction. Using drugs is probably a symptom of something deeper. Why do youth actually use drugs? What does it do for them? So part of that journey with the youth is to understand. So person A may be using drugs for various reasons, and this could be entirely different from why another youth, for instance, uses drugs. So part of it is really listening quite keenly to what the youth has to say, and then trying to have some influence over him or her, but not to the extent that you want to force things down their throats or control them. Just listening and paying attention to the extent that eventually you will be able to sort of influence behavior.
I agree, Dr. Low, when you have somebody always being there, say whether it's a mom or dad or an older sibling, somebody that you can be really open to, and starting drugs in the first place, as you mentioned, there's some underlying issue. But in Singapore, for instance, I mean, nowadays, both parents have to work. My mom was a housewife, so I know she's always there, and she'll whoop me if anything, so I'm terrified of her. But now, moms and dads, they both work, and by the time they come home at 7 p.m., there's hardly any downtime for the parents, and let alone for the kids. So, Ravi, I mean, is that a common issue that crops up among the kids that maybe you speak to?
I guess it is, because if you look at it, the kids are going to be hanging out with other kids. They're going to be online, catching up. They're going to be watching social media. They're going to be watching TV. They're going to be watching movies. They're going to be seeing stuff on the net that they may not be allowed to see if their parents were at home. That's one aspect of it. But the thing is that a parent cannot just say, because you're coming back late and you're tired, you're not going to be having these little meaningful conversations with your child. You need to build that rapport. You need to be responsible enough to understand who your child's friends are. What are their interests? What are they doing when they're not?
But knowing who your your child's friends are, that's one thing. But how do you know they have so many social media friends, like hundreds who are not even real friends?
See, that's the thing. So they have 101 people who are their social media friends, but who are the ones they actively hang out with? Who do they go to the mall with? Who are the ones that they go to the shopping centers, the restaurants, after school? Where do they go? Who are these people? They may not be from the same schools. They may be from the same neighborhoods, or they may have been introduced through some activity or another. The thing is that young kids are all gregarious. They're going to be hanging out with people. They want that.
But where are the kids even getting the money from to get these drugs? I mean, I imagine they're not cheap.
Have you seen the allowances that young kids get these days?
So actually, if I may add on to what
sure.
Ravi is saying, actually that resonates a lot with me as well, because I feel that actually with parents, modern parents nowadays, you need a different set of parenting skills, where we used to be, our parents and our generation, basically, you have cycle where your children go. But now practically every child will grow up with a digital device in their hands. Okay, so every parent eventually needs to know about the internet, about digital devices, about digital technology, so that they are able to teach their child from a very young age, from the moment they put a device in their hand. They need to be able to teach their child to be discerning. What is good information? What is unhealthy information? What are safe people to connect with online? What are unsafe people to connect with online? And I think that's a very important parenting skill sets going forward for parents, regardless of whether it is the risk of drug abuse or bullying or pornography or internet addiction or any other issues.
But Dr. Low, do you think then that perhaps, going online, there's good and bad, that parents should stop giving the iPad to the kids at such a young age? Because you see kids growing up with it, having dinner, you can see in restaurants or the food court, it's there. So to take that away after when they've had it at a young age, it's very difficult, isn't it?
Yeah, I can empathize. I'm a father to 2 young children, and sometimes when I'm too tired, I'm one of those that gives the iPad or the iPhone to the kids. So so I can empathize why parents sometimes need to do it, have a bit of downtime. But it's true because, there are screen time guidelines for children. And it's true now that, once you have that device on hand, the kids stop interacting with you, they totally lose focus. You can't really have good family time together, and a lot of this information comes out in bite-sized chunks. So, 20-second videos, it's not really very healthy because you keep scrolling, and that in itself disrupts kind of your attention. Yeah, it creates pathways in the brain in the sense that makes you cued towards short videos. Yeah, so the reinforcement for such short videos is very intense. I like to compare it to the new digital heroin. Because a lot of them, they may not be taking drugs, but, all these short cycles of feedback loops that's created by all these spurts of information is essentially tricking your brain into believing that, life is supposed to be like that. It's rewarding to watch short videos, and it creates disinterest rapidly. So in a way, I think that there is a lot of harm, definitely, towards social media. But at the same time, of course, there are good pieces of information that come out here and there. So I think as what Ravi mentioned, it's about discernment now. How do you encourage discernment in the child? How do you build it? At what age is a suitable age? And to be honest, I don't really think there's a strict cutoff age. At different children mature differently. So whilst a child may mature at 7 to 8 years, will be able to discern. Other children may mature a bit slower. So I think the important thing is to start conversations early. Once you realize that your kid is able to understand, and you do notice that he or she is using internet or the social media very frequently, then there needs to be some observation as to what they are doing online. And if there needs to be parental checks, then we got to find the time as parents. Yeah.
I like the use of, you mentioned digital heroin. Imagine a kid digital to the iPad, addicted to drugs as well. That would be like a double whammy, right? So that's just going back to what we talked about, how certain countries are more liberal, right? Like whether it's Thailand or some of the places where it's easily accessible. So let's say if you're traveling with your kid, right? You pass by a shop that says, Magic Pizza, and pizza comes out, looks really yummy. How do you even start a conversation and say, actually, it's not a happy pizza, it's, how do you even talk to your kids about that?
That's difficult. That's really difficult, because the kids are with you in a country where for example, where that's available. So the choice really comes down to how much information they know and what you're sharing with them in terms of the messaging you're giving them. There's a difference between having maybe something that's a marijuana-laced edible as compared to a food ingredient that's put into a pizza, for example.
But Ravi, I just want to pick on that point. And what if your kid says to you, but marijuana or cannabis, it's natural, it grows from the ground, or mushrooms grow from the ground, it's better than cigarettes, for instance.
The
That's
answer would be,
chemicals.
so does grass, but would you eat grass? So it's like make light of it for a certain moment, but then, think about why they're asking that question. So is it that they really don't understand, or are they trying to push buttons to see how the parent would react? Right? But most of the times they're trying to figure out what the parent really feels and what the reaction would be. But when you have a certain conversation that is serious enough to let them know that, no, this is not good for you, because the studies say so, they would then say, oh, what studies are these? There's also other information out there that says it's okay. So and so, the pop star does this and it doesn't matter. They're fine, they're successful. They have lots and lots of fans. So you need to, first of all, get resources, information, which can really then, fill in these blanks. And that's what NACADA tries to do, have these conversation materials and resources available to parents so that they can actually pull on these and speak to their kids, to let them know that these are the situations where you would find yourself in a dilemma, because it comes down to a choice. And, what you decide can literally decide the rest of your life based on that one decision. So make that good decision, and to help you do that, this is the information you're providing you. Because at the end of the day, it comes down to the individual, right? And there are people who would say yes, even if there's peer pressure, and there's also kids who would say no, right? So you would hope that your child chooses right.
Actually, maybe if I can pick up on that point too, is actually because the battle we know for young people right nowadays is because they find they have a lot of information online, and they get a lot of information a lot of time that may not be the most accurate information. But a lot of times parents also find that probably the things that they hear online actually would stick with the children's mind more than what the parents say. So I think probably the battle is where actually on social media itself, where we need to fight the battle itself. We're having more positive social influencer, people who actually are more active online that youth can identify with, that come up with alternative information that is positive, is healthy, spreading more accurate information.
Do you have some
to
examples
us.
you can share with us?
Right now, I don't have, but using the example that you talk about just now, where you have Elon Musk, for example, right? This is very popular, okay? Talking about smoking, but at the same time, we actually do also have, we know that we have people who are respected. We have movie stars, we have soccer stars who have battled with drugs, who have battled with alcohol, for example. If they become basically the more positive, the bigger voice and the louder voice online, actually advocating against marijuana, for example, advocating about the risks of drug use and drug experimentation, that might be another way actually to win over some of these young minds.
Yeah, so tapping on that, I think having youth leaders, so they are ground up groups, for instance, in part. So it's like a social service organization. Basically, they have youth leaders, and we have collaborated with them. So NAMS has collaborated with them to produce like podcasts, basically providing accurate information. So I mean, a lot of the information out there may not be true, but so if you have like kind of authority leaders, youth leaders working together with institutions to come up with genuine material, then the veracity of information is not in doubt. So these are good sources of information for youth to turn to, and definitely if a student leader speaks, it's probably 10 times more important or 10 times more impactful than what the doctor would say, would mean to you, and it doesn't come on as strongly as that, you see. So it's more in a way palatable to the youth. Yeah,
makes sense. Just before I let you go, just one last question. If each of you could suggest just one thing on your wish list, assuming that you have unlimited resources, what would that be?
One of the things that we think may be more helpful, and which we've already started doing at BCAT Community Services, is to reach out to more schools to train their student leaders, actually, to train their peer leaders on understanding the risk so that they become the voice within their community. they become the advocates within the community itself, rather than having an adult carry the message only. Yeah.
Rafi?
I think I'd spend more money on basically education in terms of getting the kids messaging very early on and making sure that it's part of the curriculum. Because at the moment, it's not. So you only have, for example, CNB, or you have other speakers coming into the schools to kind of like talk about the drug threat and stuff like that. And they all know. But the problem is, in their heads, they're only looking at very hard drugs. And, this question of whether it's an illicit drug or not is not the question, or whether it's a soft drug or a hard drug is not the question. The question is, anything that's illicit is not going to do anything good for you. So get that message started early enough, and then show them that, there are better ways of getting that natural high. And that's the reason why we started a campaign that was called High. And we asked the question, what's your high? Right? It doesn't have to be drugs. It can be life. It can be a significant other. It can be your family. It can be so many other things. Why does it need to be something that's artificial and it's going to cause you strife down that road?
Well said. And Dr. Low?
Well, I come from a treatment facility for youth and for people who use drugs. So if I have unlimited resources, I'll probably spend it on a lot of activities, a lot of things that youth can do in the hospital, in the campus, so that I can keep them occupied. Probably come up with some programs, either work programs or even entertainment for them to do to pass their time, so as to be able to understand them better, and in a way part of a journey for their recovery, for their drugs recovery.
Well, Thailand, in my view, offers a sobering case study. It, in fact, became the first Southeast Asian country to legalize cannabis, but now there are calls to walk back a recreational use. Now, with hundreds and thousands of shops selling the drug, children are becoming addicted. And some politicians are saying that it's undermining Thai society, especially affecting young people. So in Singapore, a mix of tough laws and early open communication with young people is the way to go. And parents play an important role in all of this, as well, as you've heard among our guests. So once again, my big thanks to our guests today, and to the CNA podcast team: Joanne Chan, Sai Yuen, Crispina Robert, Tiffany Ang, and Junaini Johari. I'm Otelli Edwards. Till next time.